Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Now that February has just about concluded, I have a month's worth of favorites and experiences to discuss. So without further ado, I will hop right into it. As always, I start with decks, move into books, and then culminate with various miscellaneous items as far as the favorites go, and then I will get into some experiences and updates that I think are worth noting for those of you who are curious about those sorts of things. So if you're looking to skip around, that's how I do things. Without further ado, I will jump right in. This month specifically is a little bit more exciting for decks. For me, at least. I'm usually pretty boring when it comes to that, using the same old things, and I try to rush through it. But for this month, I have a little bit more going on. So we'll start with the tried and true, and that is just any version of a Thoth deck, specifically my greenie. And I guess instead of just showing the cards, I did get a nice new case for the deck, or a sort of pouch to hold it, because I wasn't a big fan of how I was keeping it before, which was in this bag that I'd gotten on Amazon like 2 years ago just because it was inexpensive, but this doesn't really match my aesthetic. It didn't fit the deck that well, so it would rattle around and it wasn't good for transporting it. I did get one that was fit custom perfectly to the size of a large Thoth to put my greenie in. This is from, I believe the Etsy shop or the website is called Hex Couture. If I'm not mistaken, Hanny actually turned me on to this company or this creator, so I will link that Etsy shop down below. They make these really nice custom pouches. A lot of them are for standard size tarot decks, but you can either get a custom one or you can pick amongst certain measurements and then pick out different colors and designs. It fits really snugly. On the inside is sort of this silky satin green, which I got to choose. I also got to choose the color of the bag. I picked the design, and then I got to choose the metallic paint color. So I chose silver. As a Slytherin and as somebody who loves green and black and silver primarily as favorite colors, this is just, yeah, it's perfect for me. So the Thoth has been living in here, the greenie at least, the one that I use the most. On top of that, another one that will likely be no surprise if you watch this channel, or if you've been keeping up and been a part of my life for a little bit, the Alchemical Tarot tends to come in and out of my life somewhat often. I have just months where I don't use it, months where I do, but it's always a favorite, as are most of Robert M. Place's decks. Likewise, one that's come back into circulation for me is the Taboola Mundy Tarot. I, for some reason, just never really got into using it very much after purchasing it. I read M.M. Maline's book, loved it. I just wasn't ever like using this deck on a regular basis up until recently. I've been using it for my daily draws. I'm really into the sort of expressive nature of the cards with the colors. I know this is one that a lot of people are familiar with, and it is well loved as far as Thoth decks go for a difference in art style. And in my opinion, it's probably the closest, and in my opinion, maybe the only true Thoth deck or Thoth system equivalent. All the other decks that draw inspiration are not really so similar. Like, we have a lot of Rider-Waite-Smith clones and duplicates and ones that basically just follow that, but most decks that claim to follow the Thoth system don't really adhere to the same sort of look or style as closely as Rider-Waite-Smith clones do. So I wouldn't call this a clone, but I would say, as far as I'm aware, this is probably the one true other Thoth deck out there other than the original. At least that's how I see it. So have been enjoying this one a lot, getting a lot of use out of it in a personal sense, not as much with any clients. Likewise, another one that just came in for me is the Black Tarot. I'd seen this a lot on Amazon, as I think it was sponsored on Amazon, and it kept showing up for me, so I eventually just looked at all the images. I hadn't purchased a deck in quite some time. I think the last decks that came in for me were, was it the Dream Vision Tarot, which was a Kickstarter, same for the Orphic Tarot, both of which came in the mail at the same time, and those were the last two that I received. But even then, I'd purchased those about like a year ago, or a year before I received them, so it's been many months since I've tried out or gotten another deck. This was somewhat of an impulse purchase, despite having seen a lot of the images. I think I might do a walkthrough video on this and talk about it a little bit. I would say it's interesting. I do like it so far, but there are a few things I want to discuss. But it is one that has been interesting, and it just came in this month, so worth noting. And then I think that takes us through all of the tarot decks, or maybe not. There's always going to be a Marseille as well. For me, it's usually either a version of the Noble or the Midnight deck, which I always talk about enjoying. I know there's a second edition out now, so this is widely available. I might try and see if there's a difference between the second edition, just because I do like this deck a lot, and I wouldn't mind having another one, especially with the first edition and these backs being out of print. But I use this one quite a bit. And then, yeah, that will wrap up the tarot decks. And I guess the only playing card deck or oracle deck, any deck that's not tarot, for me this month was the Hermes Playing Cards, or Hermes Playing Card Oracle by Robert M. Place. Of course, it looks really nice artistically and stylistically next to the Alchemical Tarot. I like it. I just like how there's these simple images that you can play off of. You can also use it as a Lenormand really easily in the way that the symbols are placed on the cards. So it plays two different types of decks for me, although I'm not a huge Lenormand reader myself. But yeah, there's that one as well. So that about takes us through all of the decks. Now I'll make my way into the books. There's not as many this month. Like I mentioned, I want to say now 2 videos ago, I did start at a new job, and it's a little bit more demanding on my time. I'm still very much in this learning process, and it's a little bit more structured and consuming as far as my day-to-day goes. So, and I'm just kind of getting in the swing of things, so not as much free time to read, but I have read some. So what we have here are the books. So I know I've mentioned this book, but at the time I mentioned it in my last journaling video, I hadn't finished it. I was in the middle of it. I believe time is all a little bit of a blur for me at the moment, but that I maybe started this at the end of January. I may have started it in February, but I definitely finished it in February. So this is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I know this one has rave reviews. If any of you are on the BookTube, Bookstagram side of the internet, this one's often spoken about, especially for fantasy lovers out there, novel lovers, fiction lovers like myself. So I did enjoy this. It's a shorter novel, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily a quick read. It's different than books that I tend to read. It's a little bit more meditative and reflective. I tend to go for fast-paced novels that have a good degree of action and adventure, where there's a very clear and defined plot with certain points, and there's definitely direction. I like to go for page turners. Not as much of a meditative slice of life type of novel or fiction reader myself. I'm not as into just hearing about somebody's life, and there's not really much of a reason or direction for the story being told, other than maybe some sort of philosophical outlook or reflective aspect. I love meditative YouTube videos, content creators specifically, that make these very much like slice of life essentially content where I'm along for their ride. I enjoy that as far as visual entertainment goes, but when it's written, when it's literary, not as much usually. And this is a little bit more of a meditative book. However, there's a great degree of fantasy, and there are some really interesting fast-paced moments. There's also a big mystery aspect to this as well. So it's mentally engaging, even if it's not always in physical motion within the book. We have Piranesi, our main character. I guess I'll just call him that. The world is essentially, he lives in a world that is just halls and rooms filled with statues, and that is the entire world. He doesn't question this. We don't really know much about his life, or if there was any life prior to this, if he's always been here. There's only one other person that he knows of in this world that he calls the other. He doesn't question too much, but he's extremely observant. I believe they even say in the book that the name Piranesi, and I could be wrong, so feel free to correct me, is based on, or was taken from, in this instance, an Italian artist who was known for his observation skills and attention to detail. Could be so off the mark on that one, but I believe that's where the name comes from in this. There's a lot going on. There's a big mystery, and it does not end where you would expect, which I liked. There definitely is this sort of epiphany, philosophical catharsis at the end. It definitely is the kind of thing that warps your viewpoints. You might find yourself thinking differently at the end, which I really appreciated. And although you may not know where it's going for a while, I would say stick with it. And if you are into the sort of occult, magical realm or books that incorporate this, it's definitely one for you. I would say just, yes, my biggest thing here is to stick with it, and that it does all come together, although it may seem a little bit slow and all over the place, and you might be wondering where this is meant to be headed. Really did enjoy it, though. It took me a little bit to get into it. Next, we have, where is it? This one. The Mime Order. I read the first book, or I mentioned the first book, I think, in my last updates video, and it was called, I think, The Bone Season. It's a series. It's a little bit on the bigger side as far as novels go. I mentioned that it was a little bit more, in my opinion, of a stereotypical fantasy sci-fi novel. It takes place in a sort of alternate world, mostly based in London and the UK, where there are these fantastical psychic abilities that are outlawed by the government. There's this sort of very tyrannical regime that is hell-bent on suppressing and outlawing and disposing of any individuals with these psychic abilities that can affect quite a bit. I enjoy it. I would say that the first one was more fast-paced, but I did enjoy the second one more. The first one was a little bit more chaotic. You didn't know where you were meant to be going, and they kind of gave you a bunch of switch-ups to change the direction, but a lot was happening, whereas this one, not as much was physically happening, but there was a clearer direction, and you were more invested in the plot, knowing what was supposed to be or could be happening. Likewise, the development of the characters was nice, and I enjoyed that aspect. I was looking for more of that out of this series. So this one I actually ended up reading a little bit quicker, and I enjoyed it. I mentioned in speaking about the first one that I do get annoyed in the way that some terms are spoken of. They are all referred to as clairvoyance or voyance in this, although the majority of the abilities don't entail any aspect of sight or seeing. There's a lot more, most of the abilities don't have a degree of sight, actually, including the main character's abilities. That has nothing to do with her visual senses or a visual psychic sense. So that to me just made no sense in the fact that that's a word that's used like every other page, and it's being used in a way that just, it's nonsensical and it doesn't really fit, can take you out of the world a little bit. However, I would say if you're into that idea of psychic abilities and this very fantastical nature, you'll be into it. There is a degree of accuracy in terms of references, though. I like that it's this sort of futuristic society that's, of course, alternate to our own, because even when they speak of the past, it's not the same past we've had historically, but there's this sort of futurized or postmodern way of these like secret societies and underground crime organizations, all that type of thing. So if you're into that, and if you're into other realms, if you're into spirits and all sorts of fun, funky things, I think you'd really enjoy this. I did, and I'm already on the third one, currently reading the third one, so would definitely recommend, although it's a little bit more of a stereotypical type of fantasy novel, as I said. So if you're looking for something that breaks the mold or is reinventing the wheel, that is experimental, you're not going to get it with this. I tend to gravitate toward novels and series like this for comfort and that sort of magical escapism. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but it is mine, so would recommend this one. Next, we have, and one that it's not quite done, but I figured I'd mention it just because it's lighter on the books this month, The Inner Temple of Witchcraft, Magic, Meditation, and Psychic Development by Christopher Penczak. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this book and Christopher Penczak, very prolific and well-known author and highly regarded individual within the spiritual, witchy community. I would venture to say even more on the Wiccan side. I know this book and this series of books has been out for quite some time. This was a Hanny recommendation. Hanny recommends so many great things. Definitely check out her channel. I'll link her down below. But just enjoying this. I think I actually had a copy of this at one point and got rid of it and then repurchased it. It does have, I mean, I'm the majority of the way through. I have like a little bit left, but I'm like 200 20 pages deep, and enjoying it. There are exercises, which if you are doing them is going to slow down the pace as far as reading. It is a more beginner-friendly book, but there's still plenty to glean from these beginner books, and it's a little bit dated in the fact that I think this came out in the 90s, or if not the early 2000s. Definitely very Wiccan-centric in its viewpoint, so you kind of have to take a lot of what's going on here with a grain of salt, but I do think that getting back to the basics can be really valuable, especially when you're just trying to steady yourself in your own practice. I tend to gravitate toward beginner books when I just want something to sort of refresh on and get a different perspective on those same sort of core tenets. I think a strength there can only help in other areas of one's practice. So I have been enjoying this one. Great exercises, foundational sorts of exercises that I think are important. So enjoying this and almost done. I will report back when I am done. And then, like I said, I'd started the next in the series, The Song Rising, in the, it's the Bone Season series. I want to say that there are 4 and that the 4th one is either about to come out or just came out. I actually went to Barnes & Noble's after I finished the 2nd one to get this one because I had a gift card and they didn't have it in store. I had to order it, and I had like a day gap on a weekend where I really wish I had a good novel to sink my teeth into, and this one did arrive. So already reading, already invested. This one I think is actually going to be the shortest in length, it seems, compared to the other 2. So I'm curious to see how this one expands upon what's going on in this world. But that about sums up that. So we have books and decks done. I hope that those offer some inspiration if you're looking for recommendations in books and decks. Definitely curious, comment down below what you're reading and also what decks you're currently loving. I like to be inspired. I'll watch other favorites and wrap-up videos, but for some of you who, for example, aren't as much into the content creation but are in the community, are definitely a part of my community, please let me know. So getting into Miscellaneous, and I guess I'll merge the Miscellaneous with various life updates and experiences. I know I mentioned this, but I started on this new journal that I have that I'd been saving, and I guess getting into the mindset of what is the point of waiting or saving something for a time that you don't know you'll ever experience or have. This was an expensive journal I got visiting my sister in Italy. I was waiting for the right moment to use it, or I just felt like I couldn't touch it because it was so special. And it just gathered dust for years. So I'm kind of over that type of thing in my life, especially when it comes to decks, items, all things life. You know, tomorrow's not guaranteed. I'm not going to keep a nice item on the shelf to look pretty and tell myself that maybe I can use it someday. I don't see a point in that anymore. I really am trying to get myself out of that type of thinking so that I can actually experience life and not just feel like I'm waiting for a future that is not guaranteed. I'll pull my 2 cards. I pull a tarot card and a playing card every day, and I've been using the Journaling the Tarot, the little book of big questions by Andy Matzner. Each card will have 2 pages of questions that pertain to the theme of the card, and I'll use that as the jumping off point to journal about my spiritual life, my personal life, my emotions, feelings, thoughts, experiences, kind of just word vomit onto the page. I'll start by answering the question, but it starts to turn into more of a tangent and a ramble in a way that I find really valuable in understanding myself. I'll figure out things that I didn't actually know about myself and the world around me just by sort of free writing, and these questions are great. I know Andy has other books that relate to journaling or going deeper with the cards outside of a divinatory sense, so getting to know them and getting to explore the archetypes, ideas, and themes a little bit deeper. This has been great. My question for today was, I had the 10 of Cups, and I'll usually just pick whichever question on the 2 pages stands out to me the most and that I find the most sort of like juicy to dig into. It was, what is the meaning of life? And I guess my thought and philosophy and rambling on that as it is today, my views are always shifting, so ask me the same question tomorrow and you might get a completely different answer, a contradictory answer. But today, I mostly just said that I'm not sure that there is one objective meaning to life, and if there is one, I doubt any of us will get to know it in its entirety, but that I think there are an infinite amount of subjective meanings to life. For me, it's very much a life well lived, the connections and relationships I have with others, the experiences I have and cultivate, making meaning in my life, having meaningful experiences, using my time wisely to do things that matter to me, that bring me joy and happiness, to hopefully leave the lives of others and the world around me a little bit better off, or at least not worse off by my presence. So all of those sorts of things to me are really my meaning of life, or what I find meaning in life through. So it was great to really get concrete and tangible with examples of what those things look like, so that I can actively be, cultivating a life that feels meaningful. All of that comes from things like journaling, which I can't recommend highly enough. I have some videos on it. I mentioned these two in tandem in my last journaling video, but really important, and just a great way for me to express myself and to get clear on my path going forward. Any more miscellaneous items? Let's see. We have this bigger chunk, sort of raw chunk of apotholite that I got at the crystal shop I do readings at. I still do readings at the crystal shop, at the shop that I do readings at, even though I am now working full-time at a different job. I do readings. I still do my online readings, so if you're looking to book, definitely shoot me an email or a DM. But I got this there. I've been keeping it in my workspace, a little bit of a more spiritual aspect, and trying to incorporate that. For me, being at this job, it's been very important for me to keep my tarot, spiritual, magical practice alive, to still keep my personal life feeling rich, to really try to create those boundaries and capitalize on my time and using it wisely in a way that feels meaningful. So incorporating aspects like that, really getting dedicated and regimented with reading and journaling, and creating a routine where I do consciously make time for these spiritual things, for these things that I think enrich my daily life, that make me feel better about myself and my growth in a personal sense, just because it doesn't come as easily or naturally, and I do kind of have to fight and carve out that aspect. So it's kind of ignited a bit of a flame in me in this almost defiant way to really delve into, to really cultivate these crafts and things in my life. I've spent so much more time at my altar in recent days and weeks than I have in many months, mostly fueled by this sort of defiance, or need to have a strong sense of connection and higher purpose and meaning and craft that matters to me, just because I'm not currently getting that out of my career and my work anymore. It's not something that I'm being fed throughout the day. So my altar space is definitely in use a lot more. And I would say that that's a really big bonus and a positive. It feels good. There's, I guess, ups and downs to all of it, in that, the day-to-day is not my favorite. I'm going to get into that in just a second, but I'll wrap up the miscellaneous items. We've got just two more at least that I've pulled out. I kind of just grabbed these items around my room, like, oh, okay, you and you. So sometimes I miss things, but I have a piece of yellow jasper, and I think, yes, black kyanite, if I'm not mistaken. These I meant to actually mention back in January, but on New Year's Eve, I played a little game with my close family friends and friends who I was spending New Year's Eve with, and I picked up crystals at random, put them all in a bag, and had everybody pick one, and that was supposed to be your energy coming into 2022, what you might want to cultivate or adopt, something that's going to signify a bigger theme in one's life. And so everybody liked that. We all pulled one, and I had the little cards that come with them for each person. I tried to pick less conventional stones. I didn't go for, clear quartz, rose quartz, amethyst, citrine. I tried to go a little bit off the beaten path. But yeah, I got yellow jasper, which pertains to things like work and confidence and building one's self-power, as well as travel and protection and self-esteem. All of these things I think are really important. So that was a stone I got, and I also did it with another friend group because I told them about it and they wanted to do it, so I did it again, and then I did include one for myself again. So I guess my secondary theme for the year is black kyanite. So lots of protection, a little bit more grounding and earthy in the way that these themes are coming together, which makes sense. It's a devil year for me, at least when we us tarot people find out our card for the year, for me it's a devil year, so lots in the material realm, I would say, for me, and establishing my place and finding my footing. So all that's to say, these are two of those miscellaneous things. And did I have something else? I feel, oh, this I haven't begun to use, but it did come in this month and I'm excited to start using it. Another journal, although I have condensed myself down to really just using one. This one was too good to pass up, so I got this one with a lemniscate on it, which feels really fitting for me with lemniscate logic. However, it's really cool in my opinion because it has black pages. It's a dot journal, but black. And I got a white gel pen, so I don't know, it kind of feels opposite, where I am like writing in light color into like a void rather than filling a blank white or off-white sort of space with the dark ink. I don't know, something about it, I kind of wanted that contrast. So I'm curious to see how I'm going to choose to use that journal, if it's going to have a specific purpose as this sort of oppositional place, counterpoint, I'm not sure. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited to maybe experiment with that in a sort of magical, spiritual way. Now, that about wraps up all of the various items and things in my month. Like I said, I did start at that new job, and when I mentioned that and that I was kind of just going to be doing tarot now part-time, I said that I wanted to kind of keep my position and where I'm working and all of that under wraps, or at least just more private, so that I could speak more candidly about my feelings and my journey, something that I feel very comfortable, I feel very safe here at this time, and I feel like we all have a great community, and so I don't feel like I need to hold my tongue nearly as much as maybe I did a few years ago. It's crazy to think that I've been making videos and doing tarot online for about 3 years now, so it's very, very crazy, in my opinion, but so far the job's all right. It's not, I knew it was going to take some adjustment. It's very much going from one end of the spectrum to the other, and I kind of knew what to expect. I may have bitten off a little bit more than I could chew, or at least I kind of dove into the deep end in the specific type of job I am now at. It's very data heavy, and there's a lot, it's, you know, exercising some, I'll be honest, underdeveloped sides or underdeveloped parts of my experience in my brain. I went to school for English literature and communication studies, so even in a field that is a little bit more structured, I wasn't exactly imagining a lot of numbers and data and a little bit of coding and lots of organization. And I didn't exactly know that that's what this position was going to entail. If I'm being honest, do I see myself here long term, or this being something that I choose, a path that I choose to go down in a grander sense to evolve into and try to level up within? No, I don't at all. And I think that that's part of the beauty. I haven't been here very long, so of course I'm still learning. I'm going to give it a fair shot, and I'm not planning to jump ship without giving something a proper chance. But I am keeping my avenues and options open, and I think part of the beauty of where I'm at is, like I said, I feel more constructive with my personal time. I feel very called to my journal, to reading, to the altar, to this higher sense of self and personal cultivation. I definitely am exercising and learning skills that I wouldn't have probably ever encountered otherwise, which, despite the fact that they're not my forte, I think can only benefit me to at least learn and have under my belt this level of experience. And then of course there's that financial aspect with the stability in terms of the finances, which is nice, where I can make plans and know what to expect. Whereas with tarot, you know, you don't know what a month is going to be like. You have to really save and just be conscious, and you don't have as much say or control over that, although you have a lot of say and control over other things like your hours, your time, the type of work, the people you're calling your own shots. So give and take. It's definitely I've been using my journal to reflect a lot, and just kind of reaching certain points. I've been investigating other avenues of wanting to explore and branch out and experience life. I think when I feel like I'm trapped or limited by something, it makes me want to rebel. Any of my fellow Sagittarius people out there may understand sun sign as a Sag here, and then rising in Gemini, they're in direct opposition. So it very much is a tug of war. I tend to go into extremes. I will contradict myself. It's like a rubber band, and I will volley between one thing and the next. I will find myself completely making an extreme choice. So yeah, and I'm fine with contradiction. I'm fine with change. And I, in fact, find that I do change quite a lot, and I seek it out. I don't like staying somewhere that feels limiting. I avoid, I would say, what feels like, I wouldn't say I avoid responsibilities, but commitments that are a little bit more of entrapments, I guess. And then just reflecting on where I'm at. So thinking about, and these are not thoughts that I'm expressing that I don't think anybody else, I don't think they're original thoughts, but, you know, thinking about, okay, well, why did I do this? I did this for finances because I want to live in this certain place, or I want to have this certain lifestyle. But then I'm like, if I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, and then I use the money from that thing that I'm not happy doing, so I'm using the money I'm getting to cope with the fact that I'm not happy, to get myself things to make myself feel better despite being in this place. But then those things are financial responsibilities, like houses, places, objects, things that you have to constantly have financial upkeep for. So you've created a trap for yourself. You have to sustain these things that require money. So then it just kind of becomes this cyclical thing where you never find yourself outside of it. You aren't able to escape. You have a lot of financial dependence, or things that depend on you that you need to continually feed into, financially speaking. And I'm not sure that that's a life that I want for myself. That's not to say that I don't think that that is a good life, or it can be a good life. I think it can be, and I think everybody's meant for something different. But I'm still young. I don't have, very fortunate that I don't have many responsibilities in that way. Financial responsibilities, I'm not tied to very much. I do think I lead a life where I'm very conscious about what I tie myself to, and if I imagine it to be more of an anchor or a weight than something that's mutually beneficial or something that I can then detach myself from, I tend to avoid it. And I think my birth chart definitely reflects that. So investigating other avenues, seeing what's out there. Of course, like I said, I like to speak candidly here and keep this community apprised of where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I hope that my personal evolution and the way that that translates into videos and topics and things that I share and do and express can all be fun and entertaining for anybody out there who is along for the ride. So I'd be curious to know about all of your personal lives a little bit more, whatever you feel comfortable sharing at home, and your thoughts on life at large, what you find meaningful, what you find purpose in. I think purpose is super important, but I think that about wraps things up. I've rambled quite long enough. I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun or interesting, or if you want to just join this little community. And until next time, bye.